Okay, number 6. Okay, now this is the scope of the project. Okay, this is element number 6 of the research proposal. Okay, now the purpose of the project scope, I missed something here. The purpose of this project scope or scope of project is to give a good idea who are the users of the system, okay, who will benefit from the system or from your product, and what tasks will be included, because we want to see the size, okay, the size of your the size of your project, okay, how deep is your project, and so on. Okay, now for a final year proposal, FYP proposal, the project scope will assist the lecturers to assess the width and complexity of the project, whether the work to be done is appropriate for 10 credits BSc. If I'm not mistaken, 10 credits, okay? So if I am wrong, please correct me. So if I'm not mistaken, it's like FYP1 is 4, FYP2 is 6. If I'm not mistaken. If this is mistaken, I will correct this. Meaning that the total credits must be sufficient. Okay, now example. Okay, again, I'm using the example for this Belajar Lab, a virtual lab learning application for simulating chemistry experiments in the SPM syllabus. Okay, now the scope of this research. Okay, now this is actually written by the student. I copy and paste from her proposal. He mentioned that the scope of this research is divided into 3 parts: scope of user, scope of system, and scope of content. Okay, just a note here. If it is compulsory for you to have 2 scopes at least: scope of user, who are the users, and scope of the system. So what does your system cover? Okay, now scope of content. Okay, because this project done by this student is related to learning application, so there is content to be learned. Okay, there's content to be learned, so there is a scope of content. What is the content that you want to cover? Okay, so but for if your project does not related to learning application, meaning that there is no belajar Jawi, to learn English, to learn math, there's no scope of content. Okay, just scope of user and scope of system. Okay, for example, now for a proposal defense, okay, I've read in the guideline saying that, oh, you need to write several pages of scope of user, but for proposal, no need to go very detailed, because what's important is that when the people who evaluates you, for example the lecturers, you have a proposal, what's important to us is that we have some idea of, okay, what are you covering. Okay, so no need to like just the scope 3 pages, no need. Okay, normally a scope will cover like 1 page or perhaps sometimes half a page. Okay, scope of user. Okay, now for the scope. Okay, now here let me give you this example. Scope of user. Okay, the scope of user in this project will consist of 3 roles, which are secondary school student, student's parent, and administrator. So meaning there are 3 types of users that will be using this particular student's learning application, virtual lab learning application. So 3 types of users. Okay, you have students, parents, and administrator. So that's it. First, scope of user. Okay, scope of system. Now he is being detailed. Okay, now the way that you write the scope of systems, okay, there are several ways. Okay, now this student write in the form of paragraph. So she explains in the form of paragraph, but based on points. Okay, like this, similar to this one. I've seen some students create a table to do like there's a check here, check there, to show that this is the scope of the system. So meaning that both also can, okay, or it's a combination of there is a paragraph, there is a table, and so on. But what's important here is that the scope of system will give a good idea, general idea, what the system or the project will cover. For example, let me read this for you. Number one, the system will consist of registration process for new users. You know, okay, this is one of the tasks. Registration process for new users, including dummy online payment gateway. Dummy because to do payment gateway really is beyond what we can do, because it will cost you. Okay, dummy online payment gateway that will replicate real online payment process. Email notification together with email notification upon successful registration. The system will also include authentication and authorization of registered users. Okay, this is number one. She put as it's a combination of several tasks, several things that she's going to include within this particular system. Okay, number two, there will also be 3 learning modules, which one of them is the virtual lab module. The virtual lab module will include interactive learning presentation to simulate chemistry experiment in the SPM syllabus. Number two. Number three, another learning module will be the lab report module, while the third learning module will be the quiz module. Quiz module will assess students' understanding of the experiments that have been learned in the virtual lab module. The system will also include students' progress monitoring that will be viewed by the student and parent. So meaning that what's important here is that when I, as someone who evaluates the proposal, read what is going to be included in the system, so I get a very good idea. Okay, I think if this is being included successfully, I think this is sufficient, perhaps more than enough for a BSE 2-semester project, and this is deep enough and sufficient enough to be considered as FYP, for example. So you need to put in what are the things that you have in your system. So this is the scope of system. Okay. Okay, and because this student have content, because this is learning application, I put here relevant only for application with content. So if this you don't have content, you don't have this part. Okay, you only have scope of user and scope of system. So for example, this content, the scope of content will comprise 4 chemistry experiments that will be included in the virtual lab module. These experiments are within the SPM syllabus and will be based on KBSM practical chemistry textbooks. In addition, the language that will be used throughout the application is English, while the languages that will be used in the virtual lab and quiz modules are Bahasa Malaysia and English. So meaning that this is related content. So if the nature of your project is nothing related to like learning Jawi and so on, for example, you don't have scope of content, but you have scope of system and you have the scope of user. So basically, if you can write something like this, okay, for me, this is sufficient for me to have a very clear idea of what you want to include, what you plan to include in your project. Okay? Okay, perhaps you will ask, what if this changes? Okay, sometimes, you know, you plan like this, but later on in the implementation, you find, oh, I cannot do this, so difficult. So I need to change some of this. Perhaps I don't want to include this. But then you want to include something else that you do not put in the proposal. No problem. That can be discussed with the supervisor. Okay. So basically, this is the scope of consisting of scope of user, scope of system, and if you are related to like learning application with content, there is scope of content. Okay. Okay, disclaimer. So basically finish. Okay, so we are done. So basically any question on the scope of scope of the project. Any question on this? So is it clear to you?
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir, it's clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, just to give you some things. Okay,
Sir?
for the assignment later on, so I will give you, okay, because you are doing, most of you will doing two per group. So for the assignments, I will later give you some area of research. But basically, you do not need to do any development. Just, let's say, everything is in your mind. Okay, meaning that assume that you are developing something. I will give you something, then I would ask you to write, okay, if you are to develop something, you write a proposal. So write what is the introduction, what is the background, what is the objectives, what is the problem statement, what is the title, so what is the scope. So that will be your assignment later on. So I will give you this assignment to two students per group to come up with a part of a research proposal until scope of project, until this one. Okay, based on a certain scenario. So I will give you, okay, now the scenario is this. Okay, this is the conditions. So please come up with a research proposal. Okay, so in this course, you do not need to do any development. Just you need to come up with your ideas. So what are the things that you want to add? Okay, that I will give, okay, your assignment I will give you next week. So I expect everyone will be able to give who are the members in your group. Okay, please refer to the WhatsApp group. Okay, you write in your names, copy and paste. Okay, please copy and paste so that I have a list of who and who within a particular group. Okay, now disclaimer. Basically, the content is actually, the ideas are mine, but but the content of, because I've taken this from students' research proposal, so the content is owned by the students and of course by Unical, because these are previous BSE students. So I just take up examples from their previous research proposal. Okay, this is the disclaimer. Okay, any questions on today's lesson? Any question?
Sir?
Yes.
I want to ask about the online payment. So we can actually do the dummy one.
Because for online payment, okay, you need to have access to payment gateway. Okay. So for payment gateway, so basically, if you want, if your system, let's say your system in the scope, you say that you want to do payment, online payment. Okay, you need to do online payment, but for some reason, but for obvious reason, you do not have access to the real. For example, you want to pay through CIMB clicks. How are you going to pay through CIMB clicks if you cannot have the codes for the payment, because you need to actually register. There are payment, the process is very costly, it's not cheap. So in some cases, okay, some supervisors will require, because there are some free codes, some free hosting that allow students to simulate using like, this is like a prototype offered by some other on the online, but it's not the real payment gateway, but it's almost a real payment gateway. You can use that. But in this particular example, the student decided that it is too difficult, so she decided that, okay, she created a dummy. Dummy means that it's not just the interface, but it sort of, when she actually clicks, let's say you want to pay using CIMB clicks, the interface are similar to what you have in the real environment. The only missing thing is that it will send to the bank, and the bank will send the response back. Now she does not have that. sending to the bank, and the bank send back the approval. That's the only part that she is missing, because that part she cannot do it because of the difficult limitation. This is what we call limitation of the project, because not everything we can do it, because uh, like payment, you need to liaise with the authority, like payment gateway. Okay, so basically that is allowable as a dummy data. Okay, so do I answer your question?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any question? Okay, if not,
Uh, uh,
yes, ada apa-apa ke?
Regarding to the FRP project, do we need to publish if let's say I am developing a website? Do we need to publish the website or is it just like a prototype?
Okay, so basically, for the final year project, it is sufficient to have a prototype. So basically, I think many students, for the final year project, they use localhost. They use localhost. Okay, so it is www. It's not www, meaning that it's localhost. It does not run from a web server, the actual web server, but it runs from the local host. But I know some students who actually publish everything to a real web server. But the problem when you present, sometimes the Wi-Fi is slow, the internet connection is slow. So during your demonstration, when your project is being evaluated, we advise using localhost. You know why? Because localhost is fast. You are using your laptop. Okay, everything is within your laptop, so everything is fast. But if you are using like the real, then there is sometimes there is limitation. Sometimes the internet is like terrible slow. The web server is slow, so it will jeopardize your presentation. So as much as possible, for the final presentation, use localhost. Okay. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Any question?
Excuse me, Prof.
Yes.
I have a question regarding the introduction and background.
Okay.
Kan Prof kata kita macam kena refer some resources macam
Yes.
books or journal. So let's say if my FRP project is macam new and macam tak banyak lagi ada. So I'm having difficulties in finding the right resources. So do you have any advice?
Okay, I will. Okay,
Alternatives?
I can advise about that. Okay, but about these resources, okay, I will cover next week. Next week, I will cover what kind of resources that you can do to support your writing.